What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Palantir stock, ticker symbol PLTR, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Friday, March 8th. Alright guys, Palantir stock here today up 30 cents a share. That's 1.15%. It's essentially flat here in the after hours. So let's get started here with our daily ritual, the ever so important volume profile analysis. Try to pull some bias out of the market here today on the 5-minute chart. Listen, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to the channel. My goal is 5,000 subscribers here. And by the way, I need your vote. Every single day from here forward, I'm going to be covering a wild card stock. It's going to be voted by you guys, the viewer. So whichever ticker gets the most comments across today's or each day's set of videos, I will cover as a wild card stock the next day. So while you're listening here, go down and cast your vote in the comment section. Just leave the ticker with some commentary, whatever. It doesn't have to just be the ticker, but include the ticker in there or the name of the company, whatever. And I'll go through, count them up, and then cover it as a wild card tomorrow. Now, taking a look at the volume profile here, of course, I'm looking for the most obvious moves, and I'm looking for big changes in volume that correlate with those obvious moves, but also are not contextual for what we would typically expect at that time of day. I'll also toss in this little fade off the high, the intraday high of 27.50. So let's take a look here now at the volume, and we'll go one by one here. Now, interestingly here today, each move that I'm looking at is actually a downside move, because the obvious moves in the stock today just all happen to be downside moves. So if we look at the volume profile on those to see, can we pull anything out of that, where a bigger sample size in the market agreed with those moves, or at least one of them? The truth is, if we look at the volume here, pretty contextual for time of day, right? I mean, we got a little bit of a pop, but it wasn't anything definitive or consistent. It faded incredibly quickly. So that first move to the downside, you know, bears, I'm sorry, but for me, not definitive enough. If we look here intraday, there's no consistent elevated volume. You have two candles. To me, that's meaningless, okay? It's just regular variation in volume. Again, bears, sorry, but nothing definitive there intraday either. Into the close, this is actually, what's interesting is on a regular day, I would actually expect these closing candles to be a little stronger, and we kind of just varied. We were kind of all over the place. There was, again, really no consistency here, and considering that the move was longer, you know, went all the way back to this portion, there was essentially no change in volume. So, you know, just as interesting as if there was something very definitive, we can pull some information out of this as well, that at least based on today's movement, today's volume profile, it doesn't seem as if we had an outsized sample size agreeing with those moves in particular. So let's move on here and take a look at really important levels that I'm going to be paying very close attention to here come tomorrow, Friday's trading day. So here on the 30-minute chart, again, we're always looking at multiple time frames. I don't like to ever trade off of a single time frame. I mean, even when I'm scalping, I'm primarily looking at, well, really, I'm looking at the level 2 and the tape. But I'll have the 1-minute chart in the corner of my eye, but I'm also always considering the 5-minute chart. And especially on more mid and longer term trades and investments, I'm looking at the 5-minute, well, really the 1-minute, the 5-minute, but then especially the 30-minute, 4-hour, and daily. Those three are kind of my bread and butter for big, important levels for mid and longer term, but they also come into play day to day. When you meet a big level on one of these, they tend to get the most eyeballs. So they tend to be, I would say, the most heavily respected. So here on the 30-minute, we have the ever so important 50-period moving average, and that actually, you know, we talked about this last night in Palantir's video. From a bullish perspective, I wanted to see this thing moving upside and at an accelerated pace, and that's exactly what we got here today. So much so that we actually crossed underneath on, you know, after hours. Again, I always take after hours movement with a grain of salt, but that's also simply a continuation of the moving average itself, being that it is slightly going to be, you know, delayed. Bulls tomorrow here would be a great thing to see as a reclaim of that level, but honestly, when we're seeing a reclaim of this style, what I would love to see is a break upside through, okay, and then a back test of the level, and then this is probably the most crucial part of all, a higher volume pull away. All right, if you see like a weak little bounce on below average volume, I'm not convinced. Okay, but anything, even just slightly above average or especially really above average volume, that is quite a definitive move because you have a big sample size of the market coming in saying, yep, we agree with this hold here. And bears, we're likely to see a lot of bears if we end up seeing a continued hold of this 50 period on the 30 minute as resistance, trying to fade that level, which could add some added, selling pressure to the stock. Okay. Now, you're on the 4-hour chart, and that's from a trading perspective, by the way. The same thing goes for buying pressure on a break and hold and then high volume pull away as discussed. Now, on the 4-hour chart, you can see here that we're approximately a 7% downside move away from that 50 period. So bulls, ideally we wouldn't really want to see a retest of that tomorrow, especially because it is below $25 a share. What I'm really watching on the 4-hour chart is to see that 50 period get up above $25 a share. If that could occur here from a bullish perspective, I'd be thrilled. Again, getting a psychological barrier up above a round number psychological barrier to just beef up that level as much as possible is kind of always what we're looking for. Bears, you of course do not want that to occur. You'd prefer to see a flattening out of that 50 period here on the 4-hour chart ahead of that important $25 a share level. Now, on to the most important chart of all. That's always going to be the daily. The daily is so contextual. It's so heavily watched that I think it's the most obvious one to watch of all. And you can see here that today we did see some continued upside testing compared to yesterday, getting as high as 27.50 here, but of course unable to hold that level. So here's what I'd love to see tomorrow. Bullish perspective first. Any downside test of 26. Gonna want to see 26 hold as a round number, considering that's like kind of, in a roundabout way where we ended up getting held back Wednesday. Okay, the previous trading day. But looking at this chart, to me, the obvious story is that real next level past what we tested today is kind of $28 a share. So on the way there, we of course would first need to hold 26. Okay, ideally past 27 and hold it, though I have found over time that when we're dealing with stocks in this price range, it seems to me that even numbers tend to carry a little bit more weight than odd numbers. I know it sounds silly, but it's the truth. Unless you're talking about a 5, okay, like a 25 or a 35, something like that. But a hold of 26, a break up through 27 and up through that high. This is very short-term thinking, right? A break through that high today, 27.50, and then it's clear sky up to that 28. Because, ideally, from a bullish perspective, I know it's a little bit of a move away. We're talking about almost a 6% move away here. But ideally, I think a reclaim of 28 opens us up for potentially a claim of 30, which, 30, it's, I think that's really here in the near term what a lot of bulls have their eye on, but it's going to take those things to occur first, of course, before we can get there, because each one of those levels is a psychological barrier to varying degrees. Now, bears, ideally, really simple for you guys here tomorrow. You'd want to see a crack back below 26 because we've seen this 25.50 region being very, very well respected as a resistance in recent time. Your ideal scenario as a bear is to get back below 25.50, but that 26 is a round number that's kind of in the way for you to do that, immediately. So a downside break through 26 on high volume, heading down toward really a downside break at 25.50 is what you're after if you're a bear here today. Again, priority number one, if you're a bear, discourage as many bulls as you possibly can. I think that's how you do that. Interesting here, we do see implied volatility dropping massively here today to 43%. Again, the lower IV goes, in relation to your intended trade time frame, typically the more favorable conditions become for those who are looking to take an options position, a purchased options position, right? Buying options becomes the more favorable those conditions to do so become, as that trader anticipates being not only right directionally and being able to outrun theta decay, two very important things, obviously, but also typically anticipating a return to equilibrium, or at least an attempt to do so in IV, because rising IV, of course, benefits purchased options, at least through the Greek vega. It doesn't necessarily mean they'll go up, of course, if you're wrong directionally, but it adds a little bit of air through one avenue, so to speak. Now, let's take a look at what was the bias out of the options traders positioning themselves today as we head into tomorrow. 789,000 total contracts traded here today. Huge bias. 600,000 calls, 189,000 approximately puts. So we are seeing a heavy call side bias on the overall ratio. And if we break it down by time frame, every single delta range here, all 5 today, leaning bullish. Not uncommon as of late for Palantir. And those short-term speculators, of course, the 0 to 20 delta range, 126,000 calls and about 92,000 puts. Call side bias there as well. Don't forget to comment your vote for tomorrow's wildcard stock. And if you got value out of this video, please, on the way out, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.